But first, a developing story out of Azerbaijan. The Defence Ministry is there saying it has begun a campaign of local anti-terrorist activities in the breakaway ethnic Armenian-populated Nagorno-Karabakh region. 11 Azerbaijan police and civilians have been reportedly killed in a mine blast and another incident. Witnesses saying blasts have already been heard in the Armenian separatist stronghold of Stepanakert. The ex-Soviet neighbours having been locked in a decades-long dispute over the region, going to war twice in the 1990s and more recently in 2020. Regional correspondent Regis Jonte spoke to us earlier.
What we can see on the videos, for example, which were leaked on the social networks this morning, we can hear in Stepanakert, the capital of the breakaway region of Nagorno-Karabakh, some automatic shots within the city, but also obviously some blasts from heavy weapons. So this is what happened in Stepanakert, the let's say capital of the breakaway region. Some witnesses and some people in the Republic says also that finally the attack is going on everywhere on the contact line between Azerbaijan and its region of Nagorno-Karabakh. But this is not confirmed at the moment. The very last week were extremely tense. And we can say that what happened this morning in the Karabakh is not a big surprise after all. But the context is the one which was born after the second war of the Karabakh by the end of 2020. Azerbaijan won this war, managed to get the control of what it lost 3 decades earlier, the Nagorno-Karabakh and the district around it. But finally, after a negotiation of the Russian President Vladimir Putin, it didn't take the Nagorno-Karabakh as such because it was populated with Armenian population and so on. But what we observe since now almost 3 years is that the Azerbaijan is trying to put the pressure on the Armenian side to get what it could not get after the negotiation and the discussion with the Russian president, the full control of what it considers as its territory. And this is the result of this pressure. And we could observe that almost since 3 years with some threats on the international borders between Azerbaijan and Armenia and on Nagorno-Karabakh as such.
Regis Jonte reporting there. Now to other news, and the row between India and Canada continues to escalate. Canada is investigating what it calls credible evidence that the Indian government agents may be linked to the assassination of a Sikh activist on Canadian soils earlier this year. India having dismissed the allegations, calling them absurd. However, it has expelled a senior Canadian diplomat and accused Ottawa of interfering in its internal affairs. This is what the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had to say earlier.
Over the past number of weeks, Canadian security agencies have been actively pursuing credible allegations of a potential link between agents of the government of India and the killing of a Canadian citizen, Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty.
Joining me in the studio is our International Affairs Editor, Philip Tell. Philip, who exactly was Hardeep Singh Nijjar and what do we know about his assassination?
Well, first of all, we're witnessing a game of ping-pong between Canada and India over this assassination. He was a Sikh independence advocate and was wanted by the Indian authorities. They had a cash reward for his arrest because they're suspecting that he was involved in Sikh independence activities and trying to organise, for example, a referendum on Sikh independence within India itself, which was something that was illegal. And so that is why the Indian authorities were keen to get their hands on him. His name is Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and he's part of a movement which is called the Khalistan, or the Khalistan movement, which is seeking to create a Sikh homeland called Khalistan within India. This is nothing new. This has been going on for years and years since Indian independence in 1947, and that the group has been involved in several terrorist attacks in the past. It was notably wanted several times by the Indian authorities. So I think that's made it even more of a bone of contention between the Indian authorities and the Canadians, because the Indian authorities perceive the Canadians as not really doing enough to try to stem this Sikh activity, giving a free speech and a home to activists whom they would like to see arrested. And that is why we've seen this exchange of diplomats being kicked out of both countries, because basically Canada is pointing the finger at India saying, well, look, we know that you did this, we know that you assassinated him, and the Indians saying it's nothing to do with us, we do not go around killing militants in other countries. So for the moment, that's the situation between India and Canada, and it doesn't look as though there's going to be much progress anytime soon.
And this assassination, however, looking to worsen relations between these two countries, how strong were they in the first place?
Well, they are actually pretty strong. If you look at diplomatic relations, economic ties between India and Canada, you can see that Canada is the 17th largest investor in India. Both countries depend on each other for large amounts of commodities and goods. I mean, I'll give you a list of some of them. There are lentils and coal and fertilizers which are imported into India. Lentils are, of course, very important in Indian cuisine. On the Canadian side, it imports electronic items, car parts and pharmaceutical products. And both countries were on the verge of signing an agreement which is called the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. The whole point of that was to try to boost trade ties between the two countries up into the region of about $6.5 billion between now and 2035. So that has been frozen for the time being. Exchanges between the two countries have also been put on hold. We have a visit by the Canadian Public Safety Minister who's gone to Delhi in person to try to have this out with the Indian authorities, saying you cannot intervene in our country to kill or murder activists whom you want to get your hands on. You have to let us deal with it. But I think the underlining fact here, both on the part of Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, and the Indian authorities, is that there needs to be more cooperation between the two countries when it comes down to this kind of incident. And intervening solitarily without a diplomatic authority is no way to go about business between two nations that have such large trade deals with each other. So I think that's the way forward. But for the moment, we're not anywhere close to that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Now to New York, where some 140 leaders from across the globe are gathering for the annual UN General Assembly. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will take centre stage later today, giving his first speech in person at the UN. Zelensky will continue his calls for international support of Ukraine's counter-offensive against Russia. In the meantime, US President Joe Biden will be among the first to speak at the gathering. Joining me now is our international affairs commentator Douglas Herbert. First major speech of the day, Doug, is going to be by the US President. What are we expecting Joe Biden to say?
There's not going to be any earth-shattering surprises in that. When Joe Biden steps up to a podium, any podium on the world stage, and this is perhaps the biggest one, he is bringing the same basic vision. His view, democracy, multilateral cooperation, that means cooperation across the world stage, are always better than autocracy and aggression and retrenchment. That's his broad vision. And what he's going to be basically saying to what is going to be a rapt audience, because there are only a few leaders at these UNGAs. He said there are 140. Few leaders are able to really grab the attention of everyone. A lot of the speeches, people just walk out. The room's half empty. He will have the attention of people. One of the world's most pressing problems is going to be Ukraine. And he is, according to White House officials who've signaled in advance, he's going to be dedicating a lot of his time. There's only 15 minutes, technically. A lot of leaders go over a lot of his time to Ukraine and trying to convince a skeptical world, including a skeptical Ukrainian leadership, perhaps, that are looking at a lot of Ukraine's allies who keep saying, we're with you as long as it takes, whatever it takes, we'll keep on being there for you. Zelensky himself said recently that with a lot of these Western leaders and allies right now, even as they say those words, he feels intuitively that some of them are losing faith as the counteroffensive grinds on. What Joe Biden is going to be there to do is, in a very skeptical, increasingly skeptical world environment, more and more people questioning the duration, the longevity of aid to Ukraine. He's going to be saying, we need to stick with Ukraine. We're going to stay with Ukraine as long as it takes. He's going to repeat those words, and he wants people to believe it. And I'll say one thing. I said he has star power already. He will be able to hog the stage at the UN this year a little more in it because his biggest bogeyman on the world stage, his biggest adversaries, namely Vladimir Putin in Russia, Xi Jinping of China, they will be absent from the UNGA, from these speeches this year. So Biden will have a little bit more of the limelight on his speech and himself.
And talking about that speech from the Ukrainian President Zelensky, he's got a tough mission this year, hasn't he? I mean, he's got to sort of woo skeptics to continue to support his country, but at the same time also expressing his gratitude. Yeah,
you're expressing his gratitude. I will use a more loaded word in that, grovel. A lot of this is there's been a sense among some of the Western allies, obviously not publicly stated all the time, although there have been some public leaks of these types of sentiments, that Ukraine hasn't shown enough gratefulness for the aid, the billions that the West has given it in recent months. And his people say that he's gotten the message that he needs to make it clear that he is grateful to them. And it's an important part of that message, because as he steps up there to tell the world, we need you now more than ever. I know this is a long war. I know it's not taking as long as it's not going as quickly as a lot of you might have hoped. We, if ever before, in the months ahead, we need you to be on our side with humanitarian and military and financial support. It is now. And at the same time, he's going to be lacing that with the thank you, thank you, thank you. I think in one recent speech with a Western ally, he said thank you 8 times. So look for the thank yous, many of them sprinkled liberally throughout his speech. But alongside that, very cognizant of the fact that, especially in the U.S., where he's going to be appearing in New York City, in Washington, the political climate is more and more tending towards skepticism, and especially on a certain hawkish, very right wing of the Republican Party, even towards wanting to cut off aid to Ukraine. Right now, the Congress is going to be debating, as he's there, a $24 billion aid package. It looks like that could get through, but it's caught up in a lot of political sniping, a lot of extremist agendas trying to take that hostage. So he's going to be there. Please, 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 we need you. We're in your interest. Staying with us right now in the long term will be your safest bet and the best bet, not just for Ukraine, but for Europe and the broader world.
Doug Herbert, thank you very much. And Doug will be back with us later in the afternoon when the UN General Assembly gets underway. And President Zelensky's attendance at the UN comes as the western Ukrainian city of Lviv was rocked by blasts early this morning. Officials say the Russian air attack killed one person and caused major fires at industrial warehouses. Ukraine saying its air defence systems down close to 30 Russian drones launched overnight. And in the wake of the Libyan floods a week ago, there have been some protests in the worst-hit eastern city of Derna, which is now mostly a wasteland after the collapse of 2 dams led to thousands being killed and hundreds of buildings destroyed. On Monday, several hundred protesters rallied at the city's main mosque and accused the authorities of neglect, later torching the house of the local mayor. Leo McGinn has more.
Outside the mosque in the Libyan city of Derna, grief has now turned to anger amongst local residents. Hundreds of protesters gathered on Monday to demand accountability after deadly floods that devastated the town.
We call for holding all officials accountable and arresting them. Those officials who were in charge of the city, although they were not qualified.
The disaster, which saw 2 dams in the mountains above Derna break, came despite multiple warnings that such an incident was imminent, including an academic paper published last year outlining the city's vulnerability to floods and the urgent need to maintain the dams that protected it.
We just ask that if there will be any rebuilding efforts, that no Libyan company be ever involved. This is because everyone in Derna, from the head of the municipality to all the officials, are corrupt.
Since the fall of Gaddafi, Libya has been split between 2 administrations, one in Tripoli and the other in the east. The disaster has sparked rare solidarity between the two, with large amounts of aid and rescue teams being sent from the capital to Derna and surrounding areas.
Here in France, the country is set to host the UK King Charles and Pope Francis, as well as several Rugby World Cup games this week. It's going to be a test for security forces in the country who are feeling the pressure just 10 months ahead of the Olympic Games. Saturday, we'll see some 30,000 officers deployed as part of security operations, as Inka Oyateda reports.
It's shaping up to be a busy week for security forces in France as the country prepares to welcome King Charles III and Pope Francis, this all while it hosts the Rugby World Cup. Rarely has France welcomed so many high-profile guests as well as events in several cities at the same time, and authorities want as many boots on the ground as possible. In a letter sent on Monday, the Minister of the Interior demanded that prefects mobilise all available resources in departments under their authority to ensure a massive security presence. Rest and training days have been cancelled. With just 10 months to go to the Olympics, the pressure is on to make sure everything runs smoothly.
This week is a little bit like a litmus test for the Olympic Games. Our citizens and the world are watching to see how France is going to make this security operation a success.
On Wednesday, King Charles will arrive in France, a visit that was originally scheduled for March, but got postponed because of security concerns. Authorities are taking no risks this time round, with 8,000 gendarmes and police officers set to be deployed across the country. They'll also ensure security at a rugby match that will take place in Nice. On Thursday, 10,000 officers will be on the streets. Friday, we'll see the King visit Bordeaux, while the city of Marseille will host the Pope. 12,000 security forces will be deployed. And up to 30,000 gendarmes and police officers will be charged with keeping the country safe on Saturday, with protests set to take place in several cities. Marseille is gearing up to host the Pope, President Emmanuel Macron and thousands of rugby fans.
The challenge we're facing is unprecedented. It's unheard of for police officers. It's going to be non-stop and we'll have to alternate. There'll be raid forces, gendarmerie, BRI forces and officers that are specialised in the fight against drones.
The country's top snipers will be placed in strategic positions to shoot down any potential threats. Just one part of security plans that have been over 2 months in the making.
And Spain's women's players have reiterated that they will continue to boycott the national team, the move signalling a deepening of the crisis that started after the nation's then Football Federation chief, Luis Rubiales, kissed a star player, Hani Hermoso, on the lips during the World Cup presentation ceremony. Hermoso has also accused the country's soccer federation of trying to intimidate players by picking them for the national team, even though they've asked not to be called up. James Vezina reports.
It was looking to be an almost empty meeting, but in the end, 6 players turned up at a hotel in Madrid. The only words came from forward Ateneo del Castillo, the only one of the 6 not on strike.
I've already said everything I wanted to say in my statement. I said I was going to be here, so thank you, everyone.
Even the head coach refused to give any details about the situation.
I'm sorry, but we're not going to talk.
Newly appointed coach Montse Tomé took players by surprise on Monday when she named a 23-player squad, which included 20 players who'd already declared that they were on strike. While the head of the country's football federation, Luis Rubiales, ended up resigning after he kissed forward Gianni Hermoso on the lips during the team's World Cup celebrations, players want to see more reforms within the federation, but they could face fines of up to €30,000 and a suspension of their federation's licence should they not turn up to training.
The government wants the Spanish team to be able to play its games. We want there to be changes, for them to be quick, for the confidence of the players to be restored, and most importantly, what we want is to see them play and see them win.
The players' boycott is set to affect their upcoming Nations League games this week. Montse Tomé plans to announce her squad for their fixtures against Sweden and Switzerland on Friday.
Well, if you've ever wanted to buy a dinosaur, now is your chance. The skeleton of a rare Camptosaurus will be up for auction next month, and this for the first time since its discovery in the 1990s. Inka Oyateda has more on the dinosaur referred to as Barry.
It's over 2 meters tall, 5 meters long, and still has some of its teeth. The near intact skeleton of this Camptosaurus, known as Barry, is set to go under the hammer in Paris. It's enthralled potential buyers and scientists who've been particularly impressed by its skull, which is one of the most complete ever found.
It's an extremely well-preserved specimen, which is quite rare. Look at the skull, for example. It's 90% complete, and the rest of the dinosaur is 80% complete.
Barry's believed to have walked the Earth at the end of the Jurassic period, roughly 150 million years ago. It was discovered in the 1990s and restored by paleontologist Barry James, who the skeleton was then named after. It's rare that paleontologists find fossils as complete as Barry, and even rarer that such skeletons appear on the market. Auctioneers say getting Barry ready for sale was a mammoth task.
Fossils are found scattered about, and you have to painstakingly restore them, scrupulously restore the elements, mount them, give them shape. And that's a long, tedious job that requires a lot of energy and time.
The auction, which is expected to fetch up to €1.2 million, will take place in the French capital in October.
And now to a new world record out of Paraguay. That's where 580 dancers in the country balance some 2,200 bottles on their heads. Now, if you do the maths, you'll see that means that 2, 3 or even 4 bottles were balanced on the head of each dancer. Dancers were performing the Paraguayan traditional folk dance at the first edition of the National Day of Bottle Women. certainly can't afford to lose your balance doing that dance, that's for sure. Now it's the time to take a look at the latest culture news. And joining me in the studio is Diptyka Lahon, who's here to take us through the latest TV shows of the month. And we're starting with season 3 of The Morning Show on Apple TV. Is it as good as the first 2 seasons?
I'm a bit, jury's out on that one, innit? The Morning Show is indeed Apple TV Plus's hit show about the cutthroat world of morning television shows. It's back for its 3rd season, picking up after a rather overly dramatic season 2 that saw the death of Steve Carell's character, TV presenter and sexual predator who was the focus of the first season. Season 3 looks at the network's financial problems and introduces John Hamm's character. He's a shadowy tech bro. Take a look.
UBA has been the target of a cyber attack.
This hack is nuclear.
Certain things may come to light.
Did you ever tell anybody?
Personal things that were never meant to be shared.
Let all the secrets come out. They did not protect me.
They didn't protect you, but I did.
We are flirting with financial disaster. We need someone with more money than God.
I am offering you a lifeline. Take the money.
So the unique thing about the show, Annette, is that it has always mirrored reality. Season 1 was actually re-scripted to fit the Me Too movement. Season 2 had to be rewritten because of the COVID pandemic. And Season 3 now mirrors this uncertain world emerging post-pandemic with network television struggling financially in this changing world.
So how does Season 3 fare?
Well, look, like I said, jury's out on this one. I'm a bit ambivalent. After 3 seasons, it feels like the characters haven't really evolved. The acting's a bit tired. Do we really need another season that cynically mirrors our society today? Probably not. Having said that, you're probably going to watch this if you enjoy it as sort of this captivating, soapy office drama and nothing else more. Well, then in that case, it's definitely the show for you.
And from you, One Piece, the most popular manga ever given an American adaptation.
Yes, that's right. One Piece, Annette, follows the story of a young man and his pirate crew's search for the fabled One Piece treasure. It first appeared as a manga in 1997. It was the most published manga in the world with over $500 million in sales. There have been numerous attempts to adapt this for the big and little screen. 11 feature-length animated movies, 4 short films. Netflix's live-action American adaptation is being held by critics as the manga adapt that broke the mold, or rather broke the curse. It's got an international cast, a huge budget, reportedly over $100 million, and it's garnering a lot of praise for managing to appeal to those not familiar with the manga, while also being a sort of love letter to fans who've been sailing with the Straw Hats for years, even decades. And the reaction from critics and fans has been incredible. One Piece rose to #1 on Netflix in its first 2 weeks. It's already been renewed for a 2nd season. And just before I go, don't forget you can check out the full TV series show on Arts 24 at 5:15 p.m. Paris time today.
Dipty, thank you so much for that. And that's it for this edition. I'll be back after a short break. So in the meantime, do stay with us here on France 24.
1966, an unbelievable story that's been largely forgotten. Above the village of Palomares in Spain, 2 US Air Force planes collide. One of them is a nuclear bomber. On board, 4 atomic bombs. None are armed and they do not explode, but 2 are cracked open on impact with the ground, creating a plutonium leak, posing a risk to health and threatening the ecosystem. While the 3rd bomb remains intact, the missing 4th bomb is found at sea after a tense 89-day search. Hear the moving testimonies of locals in search of answers, and experts denouncing the lack of transparency on the part of the government and the US military. Palomares Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.
Alegría siempre.